Comments, give us a sign.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the VR Download, a weekly show broadcast live from the Upload Virtual Studios, where we bring you the latest news, reviews, comments, and interviews from the VR space. See, I'm glad we redid it because that one sounded better. I am your host, Kyle, who is not David. So those of you who watched last week saw that David was not Kyle, but that's been fixed. That bug has been removed. All right, let's see who else we have on today's panel.
Hey everyone, it's Harry, news writer for Upload VR. Over here we have...
Thank you, David. I'm Jamie. That's good of you to introduce me like that,
I'm
David.
Ian. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Good to see
All
you.
right, so let's get into the first subject of the day. And let's see, it looks like the first piece of news today is about Valve. Future Steam VR features will be on OpenXR as Valve transitions from OpenVR. Who here wants to explain to the audience Ian, I saw your hand raised.
Ian's hand went up.
What is OpenXR versus OpenVR? Help us out.
Yeah, so
Explain
it's
to the teacher, Ian.
fairly confusing because of the similarity of the terms, but OpenVR is more or less the system that Valve implemented that lets a variety of headsets interact with Steam VR. So it was more or less a precursor to OpenXR, which is a completely industry-wide standard. There's all the companies that support it. Pretty much across the board, you can see Valve, Epic should be up there, Unity should be up there. Unity is there.
Yeah, there it is.
And Facebook. I don't see where's Facebook.
You see Oculus.
Yeah. So
And
you have pretty much the entire industry supporting OpenXR, which is a standard that more or less lets you, in theory, write one app that targets an API and then accesses multiple types of VR headsets out there. So it should make it easier to make an app for multiple devices.
Does Pimax isn't on the list? Do they support OpenXR?
Oh no. Oh no. Get it together.
Maybe not.
We could put up the chart that shows how big Pimax is on Steam and
Oh damn, going all in today already.
Man. Yeah.
Sorry.
Personally,
We've only been
I'm
5
very
minutes.
glad that the very silicon is in there. I would have been worried if very silicon wasn't in there. Same as silicone, sorry. Z-Space.
Now,
Very glad
hold on.
Z-Space is in there.
I will say that I have
That's
used
an early one.
Z-Space's products, and
Yeah.
I actually am a big fan of their technology.
they've been
I
around
wasn't
for
being
a long
sarcastic.
time.
I wasn't
No,
being sarcastic.
Oh, come on.
Yeah, sure.
I'm
Hey.
just as excited about Z-Space as I am Luna G.
And
That's a G?
Microsoft is up there.
Yeah, look at that.
Okay, yeah, I guess it's yeah.
So the trick here is that I think OpenXR now accounts for AR stuff, and we'll have to see in like sort of future versions of OpenXR how that extension happens. And then the other thing that sort of needs to be noted,
What?
Nokia.
Sure.
It's
What's
so when
Nokia
you-
done recently?
it's so
Sorry,
when you wanna-
Nokia,
when
if
you
you're
wanna-
watching.
When you want to enable VR on your tiny brick phone, you can do that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, thank you.
Well, and
Anyway,
they've
sorry,
got that. They've got that
Yeah.
big 360 camera.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
it had a name once. I can't
So
remember what it was.
I think it ended.
Ian-
Oh,
Heaney and I have gone back and forth
Those
on
are-
this because
Yeah.
there's still significant differences between an Android-based standalone headset and a PC-based, VR headset. And so even if OpenXR is going to solve a lot of, targeting multiple headsets with a single app, it's still going to require a significant amount of effort on developers' parts to get their apps both running on like a standalone with super resource-starved Android ecosystem and a PC headset.
Something kind of related to this, what you were saying about the Android and the standalone headset and the PSVR headsets. Talking to the co-creator of Shooty Sky's Overdrive yesterday, or was it yesterday? Whenever I talked to him, he was saying that because they're a mobile studio, for them, which I think they're one of the only ones, they were kind of happy in thinking about Quest first because they're used to Android. And so it was kind of like the opposite way to how you usually see it, where they're going back to PC. And I thought that was really interesting. It's like them and the guys who did The Room, and they're the only two places that are kind of like mobile studios going the opposite way around. So that was just an interesting thought that I had, but please go on.
Yeah, no, it's what you're describing is like a tricky way of kind of like explaining this to people who are just like maybe considering the jump from development on another system to VR development. And it's like, you just have to realize how incredibly difficult it is, A, to get through Facebook's development pipeline and be approved for release on the Quest. And then B, just performance-wise, how hard it is to get on the Quest in the first place in order to get your software running at frame rate. And then, but if you can get through those two kind of like things, then in theory, it's easier to adapt from Android to a PC release, isn't it?
Sort of. I mean, the way that these two charts demonstrate the differences between prior to and after OpenXR, it almost feels like it's simplifying the process. But in reality, how much simplification is actually occurring here? I mean, the problem with standards is that getting everybody onto one standard. I mean, everybody's seen that XKCD comic about standards and stuff. Is this actually that much better than what we were dealing with? Because then in the long run, you still end up with 5 devices at the bottom who are coming through the same steps. OpenXR is just interjecting itself in order to streamline it, save a couple milliseconds, cause a better compatibility.
Doesn't it make it easier for developers to implement that and not have to kind of jump through hoops to make sure everything's supported? Isn't that the idea?
Well, that's what I'm asking. Is that
I believe
intention?
That is. I believe so.
I mean, one thing I do know is that developers have to go through a significant process to map their software on all the different control schemes. Though that said, Daydream is dead, Gear VR is dead, and
Rip.
we've got Go is dead as well. So 6DoF 2 controllers, 6DoF controllers is a kind of like a standardization that's happened in a different way. It's one of these things that's over a long period of time we'll see this take effect and simplify the process. The dream is there's always this dream that you've got this library of content that you can take to any VR headset you have down the line. And I think we're still years away from that being the reality. The significant thing, at least from the Steam VR news, I think, is that we'll get into this later when we talk about Valve Index stuff. But we need the Steam VR ecosystem, I think, could use a lot of upgrades. There's a gap there between the experience of setting up an Oculus Quest or a Rift S and setting up a Steam VR headset with the Guardian outside VR. There's a very big gap there. And I think the fact that Valve at least said that new features in Steam VR are likely to be supporting OpenXR is an indication that maybe we'll see some new features and new experiences for the Steam VR ecosystem in the coming months. And it'll also be attached to this OpenXR stuff.
Everybody's familiar with the concept of the reality algebra that we do, especially on social media, that AR plus VR equals XR, solve for R. It's a strange thing. Are there any AR Steam projects out there right now that can be run on any of the commonly known AR headsets like HoloLens or Pico or not Pico? What am I thinking of? Nreal.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Steam's support is still limited to the VR headsets. Like when MR is not in reference to HoloLens, that's in reference to the Windows mixed reality VR headsets. Which, of course, let's talk about MR now. No,
I don't want to. Please don't. It brings back bad memories.
So what's the general concept here? What will the end user see as a result of this versus what will the developers see as a result of this?
I mean, that's the thing. The end user should see very little change, and the developer should eventually see a way of targeting Oculus, Steam, and eventually other headsets with a single sort of interface and API. But it's a long process. This is still, I think it's still in beta support. Is that right, Heaney, on Rift? It's like hidden in Rift. But yeah, so there just needs to be more robust support. Windows, for example, has OpenXR runtimes running, and so you could build an app to do that. I think I even tried. I might have tried to run something through that, and it was a little buggy. So this is still in development, still rolling out, and it's even a beta release in Steam as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for a widely established open platform standard that everybody uses. It'll make the development much simpler, but will everybody be on board? So Oculus, all the people that were on that original slide, these are all people that are supporting it. Who's going to be the big one that doesn't, that screws it up?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the elephant in the room is always Apple, and that's kind of the concern, that maybe they throw a curveball into all that down the line. Then again, like Apple support, when they finally get around to doing a VR or AR headset, supporting this could be a powerful way of
surely
supporting
they
it.
would not. I mean, maybe they would.
They
But
might.
Apple
And don't
Apple
call
always
me
up to their
Shirley.
own. Apple always up to their own thing, don't they? That's my
They do. They love to have
That's
their
my-
own version
yeah.
of everything. Yeah.
yeah. Surely
I
they can make their own.
can't
standard.
understand why they do that. All right.
Oh,
Hey, let's move on to the next piece of news.
Apple bashing.
What's the next
Gotta
piece
have
of
our weekly
news?
Apple bashing.
And
I
This is the-
apologize
like,
again. We swapped out
non-Apple-
David, and it's still Apple
no.
bashing.
I have switched to the dark side, and I have been using Apple for several years, and
But you're still
understand.
on the dark side.
I understand the ecosystem. Well, years of Android.
You're like,
I mean,
Android.
Darth Vader's still called the dark side, Harry.
That's
Okay,
true.
it's true. It's
Yeah, I mean,
true.
come
At
on,
least-
man. He
I don't-
always knew where he was.
I don't think Tim Cook calls himself Darth Vader though.
Well, not
I'll
in
give you that.
public.
None of yet. Yeah, exactly. Around
No, he
Apple
doesn't have
headquarters,
the
it's like, you
hubris.
will address me as Vader.
Yeah, Lord Cook, or Lord Apple. All right, the next piece of news is Facebook is getting rid of Beat Saber from all of the VR arcades, which has
Rest in
just
peace.
blown my mind. I mean, just exploded my brain, because that's actually a lot of fun. I mean, I could play Beat Saber right
Oh.
now if I wanted to, but the idea of kids or adults going to
Mm.
arcades, what, Harry?
Really?
What do you think? Yeah.
I don't know. I don't really. So just to be clear, we are talking about those ones with the
Yeah.
really obtrusive wire,
Mhm.
and it always looks terrible when you're watching someone do it. I've watched so many people do it. I'll do a demonstration of what someone using this arcade looks like.
All right, Harry.
I mean, it
I'm-
just looks like you're playing
it
Beat
looks-
Saber.
I'm only going to
it's
say
you get
this once.
punched over, and it's like
Hold
the
on.
cord's always too short.
I'm only going to say this once. You show me, other than the ones that are scripted and are probably not really playing, you show me a person who looks really cool doing VR all of the time.
No.
Especially
But
Beat Saber.
I mean,
Right.
like the Beat Saber cord on those machines always look too short. People looked uncomfortable. I
It's-
never like it. Not just looking lame. It didn't look like a good experience to me.
It's
ever.
super poorly maintained in a lot of places. Yeah, I'm just giving you a hard time, but
Yeah.
he's very right.
What's the logic? Why did they remove it?
Ian,
Okay, I went off a lot on that last one, so I was going to let you all speak.
but you
Uh,
you know more.
I try to be an objective journalist and not interject my opinions as often as possible, even though it's hard. We live in a Twitter
Look how that worked out for the
ecosystem.
Oculus Go.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm disappointed that Facebook wouldn't comment on the record about this, and I reached out to both Beat Games and Facebook for an official comment explaining this. They did not. My suspicion or guess would be that it's a music licensing issue. A lot of our commenters, I'm sure, in the comments on our stream, as well as the comments on the article, are all at the same sort of conclusion that it's a music licensing issue. And the fact that they would not comment on it gives strength to the idea that maybe there's an ongoing negotiation underway with music labels that they wouldn't want to interfere with by commenting publicly that such and such label are being jerks, and we didn't want to,
Games
keep the
that
team
use
unfocused on something that wouldn't work.
games that use licensed music is an epic fail in every direction for every group of people who wants to stream or wants to share a trailer or wants to do anything. I mean, we're constantly dealing with this. This is an ongoing problem. In a game like Beat Saber, where everybody wants to show themselves whipping their blades up and down and high scores, you put it on Facebook, Facebook mutes it. Facebook,
And it's somewhat related to this. This is a very good point you just made, because you reminded me of something which came up a few weeks ago, because Twitch started doing that whole DCMA thing, going back through old clips and bringing up.
I saw a bit of news yesterday that apparently Facebook, I never knew this existed, had a TikTok clone of some sort that shut down. And one of the things in that TikTok clone was a, quote, like, large library of music that you can import into your short videos that you would produce for Facebook's ecosystems. All of this to say that I would not be surprised if, senior executive staff at Facebook weren't in negotiations with the music labels for something around Horizon. Like, I would imagine that you want to listen to music in Horizon, use music in Horizon, build worlds with music. There's a lot of things that Facebook, I imagine, would want to do down the line with music, and it might require a whole new license agreement with these corporations.
Just to get access to the... You go.
Well, isn't it just more to do with the fact that they were using Windows VR headsets on those rubbish stations that me and Harry are talking about? I get where you're coming from with the music licensing thing, but the current installations for Beat Saber were really bad.
I was also going to say, isn't the music on these installations music?
Those arcade machines, I think, are separately managed from the arcade situation I'm talking about. When I'm talking about arcades, it's like an HTC Vive, a specialized business HTC Vive that has Springboard VR and a version of Beat Saber available through Springboard that's built for an arcade.
Oh, right. So not the machine, the purpose-built machines.
I'm not sure that those are going to be around or not, but I think
they were in Asia. They were in Asia. I don't know if I ever saw.
But there's someone that's doing them for North America as well.
Oh,
yeah, I've seen a couple in America.
I mean, it's like Dave and Buster's fodder for sure. I mean, you'd definitely be able to put a Beat Saber machine in of Dave and Buster's and have a line of people who want to try it. I'm wondering, though, just to take it to the next level, is there something in their, I don't know, end user agreement or something that says that I can't publicly show this off? So if I drove up in a white van and said, "Hey, come play Beat Saber,"
what?
It is
don't do that. Just so you know.
Realize
don't
that now.
Don't ever do that.
I get it. But if I made an installment that was publicly available for people to come and use, is that violating what Facebook is trying to accomplish?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. So the other question I have, I was going to say with the going back to the music, you're saying it might be a music licensing thing, but the thing is aren't a lot of the standard songs on Beat Saber owned by them because they made the music?
No, some of them were, but we're talking the last year of Beat Saber's life has been Imagine Dragons, Green Day.
Can you restrict it so there's no music packs? I guess there's no way to do that because you then have to have a custom Beat Saber version. So I guess that makes sense. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that is a fair point. So there's Supernatural out there. There's Pistol Whip. There's the Springboard VR recommended like 4 or 5 other music apps that arcades could use instead of Beat Saber. The issue with all of them is because we're, a media news outlet, we like to show gameplay of these various games, and there are different sort of workflows at each of these companies, and each one is handling the licensing issue differently. And so if I record a couple songs in Supernatural and want to post that on our YouTube channel, it's very likely we're going to get a takedown request from the music label who owns that song.
Yep.
And be told off.
Yep. And so like I think that's kind of that's a pet peeve for me. Like I've got this long history. Like my earliest computer memories was going into iMovie and learning how to make iDVD projects and burning a DVD and putting it in the machine and showing that to my family. And then I realized, as soon as the internet came around and I wanted to sort of put that on YouTube, all those songs in my iTunes library were dead to distribution. And I think there's a real sort of like opportunity out there for Apple or Facebook or Amazon to make those songs for distribution with user-generated content. Let people remix them. Let people use them in their personal projects.
The thing is, though, is that the reason why this licensing is so difficult to figure out is because people don't want their music, their art associated with certain things. Somebody might have said, I don't want my game to be in Pistol Whip, or I don't want my music to be in Pistol Whip because I don't want people going pew 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 to my tunes. Now, you can't stop somebody from doing it personally, but to broadcast it out to the rest of the world that you're using this song to shoot shadow people with is, I mean, I can see where that could be a problem for certain artists.
Yeah. And also, I think the other thing too with this stuff is like, I imagine for Facebook, right, if they're trying to acquire the rights to like, use Green Day in Beat Saber, it's probably a lot harder to say use Green Day and anyone that uploads it can, get away without getting a copyright takedown or anything like that. Like that's a whole other layer that they have to add on there that I imagine would make negotiations quite harder or make the artist less enticed to sign on.
The last thing that I'll say about this is that I have been to a Dave & Buster's, and there is a kiosk where you can play Angry Birds or Fruit Ninja. It's a big TV. It's a big touchscreen TV, and people are lining up to pay to play this game that they can play on their phone for free. But yet they still want to do it in there. And that's the only thing that I feel is unfortunate, because I like the idea that every single one of these booths in the picture, which was probably staged or not, that people want to go and try things that they don't want to buy yet. This is gateway for you going home and buying a Quest. So
no one has ever looked that comfortable, Kyle, using one of those machines. That's like, that photo is like taking a photo of an iPhone straight out of the box. Like it looks amazing. And then like, or any phone. And then, 6 months down the line, there's scuffs all over it. The power button stopped working and you're hunched over, like trying to do some weird stuff with Beat Saber.
Yeah,
no one
it's hunched over.
They're always, because the cords get too short and people like, it's always weird and they're always like in a weird position with their head. I don't know. I feel sorry for anyone that's ever used one of those things because they never look comfortable. They never look good.
All right, let's move on to the next piece of news. Okay, Google is doing something really fun. Google figured out how to stream 6 DOF video over the internet. All you need is a $10,000 camera and a 300 megabit connection.
But it's pretty cool technology.
It's really neat. I mean, if you look at the concept of it, this rig itself, what it's doing is it's giving you basically a bigger center point that you can move around. So by having the cameras be out further from the center point, it gives you some wiggle room. You're still going to end up having a physical limit to how far you can go.
This isn't light centimeters.
Right. It's not.
It's usually like the sphere of the. It's usually the sphere of the camera that you can actually move your head around in.
It's like 70 centimeters. It is
70 centimeters.
So you've got 70 centimeters of like movement distance from where your head starts.
Hey Google, how many inches is 70 centimeters?
Oh my.
70 centimeters is 27.559 inches.
All right, it's almost 30 inches. Wow. All right, it's over 2 feet.
Thank you, Google.
Thank you.
Jeannie, can we have Google join us as a physical character for the next edition of the podcast?
That was actually pretty impressive that came across the stream.
I would
just
like Google and Siri in here.
Put like 4 colors in a chair, the 4 Google colors that just sit there spinning.
Just doing the little swirly thing they do.
But we've got Stevie the TV, so it'd be nice to have Siri represented in here and Google represented.
Siri, like,
Stevie the smart TV.
Yeah,
but it's pretty cool. There's like 40 something synchronized 4K cameras in there, in that dome, and you can even use the dome as like a viewfinder, so you can like look into it when you're filming to kind of get the, get an idea of what you're seeing. It's pretty cool. And then you get 70 centimeters of movement, and you can hypothetically stream it if you have a fast connection. But obviously,
I appreciate the software that's necessary to take the images captured from this rig and turn it into something consumable. But that rig there, other than being a $10,000 bunch of cameras stuck to a sphere, isn't as impressive as it could be. I mean, idea of light fields and all of that, this is a stopgap is basically what I'm getting at.
Mm.
I don't know. Have you guys had much experience with 360 cameras and things like that?
I had one of the VR 180s, and I hated it, honestly. It was just, it was so hard to get number one, the lenses, you could get a smudge really easily on multiple lenses, and that's, just right off the bat, that's an issue. And then just getting sort of the right subject matter at the right distance was a huge pain with those sort of 180 cameras.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, we've seen a lot of these cameras over the years, and there's a big, 6DoF is kind of like, I haven't wanted to come out and say it because, you're talking to these people face to face, but like 6DoF or go home, right? Is how I feel about whether it's compelling or not.
You hear that, Felix and Paul?
Yeah.
Calling you out directly now.
That's true. That's the
6DoF.
one exception.
Yeah, it's 6DoF or nothing. I get it.
Felix and Paul, get in this studio. You won't even understand how to move your head.
Felix and
Anyway,
Paul,
sorry.
and then NextVR obviously got bought by Apple, and those were like the two exceptions, kind of in my mind, to the rule there of how important 6DoF is for comfort and enjoyment. And NextVR even had some 6DoF tests.
Yeah, because there were some things with NextVR and with like the NBA games and stuff where you could kind of lean things kind of. It wasn't really authentic on this level. I'm not even sure if it was 6DoF. There was some kind of effect they were doing, to make kind of
It might
not
be
just
nice.
look like you were sitting on it.
Intelligent.
No, but it was something.
NextVR showed me, I believe, a small 6DoF test at a CES one year. And so like it was on their sort of drawing board that they wanted to do 6DoF.
HoloLens had a 6DoF 360 video type of experience where basically what they did was they did a rig similar to this, but then they created within the sphere of your movement a kind of a virtualized part. So they like took a like a park, and they took the grass and the trees that are very close to you, and then they virtualized it. They made a Unity 3D model version, and then they put the video on the outside of that.
Mm-hmm.
So you could move around a bit, but there was still a physical limitation how far you could go, but it was much bigger.
That's interesting.
It really is kind of neat, especially when it's coming from an AR headset where it's, transparency and all that stuff.
There's been a flip side of that where I've seen like they bring an actor into one of those Microsoft capture studios.
Yep.
And then they put that person inside of a
too,
virtual environment. And the combination of like 3D captured person in a virtualized environment gives you the 6DoF freedom to walk around. Hallelujah. Did you ever see? I think there was a performance of Hallelujah.
Oh, I remember that. I remember that. Yeah. I don't know if we talked about this. Isn't like light field capture just way more exciting than this? Like, or am I,
but it's also no, you're right. It's way more intense and requires a lot more computation.
But I mean, there is stuff you can try out now. Like Google has their own version of it on Steam VR, which is really, really cool. But this is an
extension of that, right? This is an extension of that research. The problem.
Okay.
It's the thing about
and the other thing is that this is something that, even though it's, we keep saying 10K, I think it's actually like 7.6 or something K, but it is something you can go and buy and use, and like it exists. And I think Heaney made the point in the article that 7.6K for such a specialized technology, I think it's like each of the cameras is like 100 and something bucks, but it's like really, it's not that much given what you're kind of doing. You know, I mean, you think about specialized cameras, they're really expensive. Some, film cameras are hugely expensive. It's not that much.
A true light field experience would give you the opportunity to walk around everywhere. All Google is doing right here with this technology is giving you the ability to go like this
Yeah.
with your head and not have to worry that the video is stuck to you. So all it's doing is giving you this type of rotation and movement to give you less nausea when you're viewing a 360 stereo video. And that's brilliant, but it's not as in-depth as I can get up and, I'm just going to get up and walk around now. It's not that way.
Yeah.
But it
Well,
is
it's
cool.
an
It's a good step
in between.
forward. Yeah,
It's a good step
exactly.
forward,
It's a
yeah.
stopgap. Yeah.
Yeah,
Stopgap.
the only thing I wanted to add was light field is one of those terms that's often misused by a lot of marketing organizations. And the people behind this is Paul Debevec's work, right, Heaney? Paul Debevec was at the USC Mixed Reality Lab where Palmer Luckey worked, where Mark Bolas worked before sort of the explosion of VR. And then Paul went on to take his research to Google and start sort of developing exactly this type of tech. Mark Bolas is at Microsoft doing some of their VR work. And then obviously Palmer Luckey went on to do Oculus and
grow goatee.
Yeah. But
a really good goatee. Well,
just interesting to see these kind of technologies live almost a decade later in more refined ways. Like there's still clearly a long path to go for this. But like I want to say a decade ago, the stuff Paul Debevec was working on was like a whole light stage where you literally had a whole room flashing lights at a person in order to see how the light bounced off their faces at every different angle. And it was this giant rig. You'll see it in some sci-fi movies. And it's just kind of like, this is the other end of the technology. These are cameras looking out rather than lights sort of capturing inward. But you can see that it's getting smaller and smaller and closer to consumerization.
All right, let's talk about what Google did. Google bought somebody, North, and they bought their focal Smartglasses. Is anybody here actually seen these in real life or out in the wild?
Modeled by Kyle right now.
Yeah, I somehow missed them at the various events.
Well, what are they offering that's so valuable that Google bought them?
Like, I think that's realistically a Google Glass 2.0. Like, if we're going to go back to it's lacking the tracking necessary for a real AR system, lacking the display system to match it. I mean, it's got a display system, but it's not the same as a tracking driven display system that can actually map what you're seeing onto various objects in the real world. So this is like a smartwatch on your face is more or less what Focals, I think, was and what it fit into.
It was notification based, right? It was all about notifications and stuff, wasn't it? Yeah.
There has been an ongoing debate over whether or not Google has abandoned the concept of smart glasses, AR, VR, XR. Where's Daydream? Where's Cardboard? Where's there's no momentum for any of that. So why would they purchase this unless they are still actively pursuing that type of technology?
I mean, they seem pretty active in AR, do they not? Like in terms of not just glasses AR, but like mobile AR stuff, AR core and things like that. There's always stuff that they're improving there. I guess not quite the same, but you know.
But what are they journeying to?
What are they working towards? Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think with Google, there's a lot of like, I think to that stuff with, to go back to like, as I was just saying with AR Core, you know, there's a lot of stuff they've done. Like the most recent thing I wrote about was that you could search for something and click on view in AR and it would bring up, you know, a model of a human body or organ or something in AR and you could explore it with your camera. And I think with Google, because they've got all that kind of inbuilt system, there's a lot of like education kind of potential there, you know, with something like an AR glasses integrated with Google, integrated with search. Don't know what that means in terms of hardware where they're trying to end up, but I think Google does have a lot of potential for like integration because there's such a system in place for, you know, integrating that with. I don't know if that makes
Absolutely.
any sense, but
No,
you
it
know,
does. It does.
Yeah.
I don't know, guys. That's
The thing with Google is it's perpetually like a joke that they respond to competitors in a weird way. They eventually find like a way to. The whole business is about automating a process to access the entire global population. So like they don't consider it like a worthy market for them to think about unless it's all 7 billion people on the planet that they could potentially reach. And AR
it's pretty crazy
is,
thought.
Oh yeah, I mean, and Facebook's kind of like approaching it from this other end of like, we think VR is going to be, we want to get to 1 billion people with VR. That's 1/7 the percentage of the whole global population, and it's still years and years away of being achievable with VR and AR. And it's just it's approaching these things from completely different perspectives. Where like Facebook and I mean Apple obviously has the rumors out there they're actually getting serious about doing glasses, and it's just kind of like if you go back to glass, you had this product that was extraordinarily expensive and had a very limited feature set, and the leadership of Google at the time thought, no, this is great product design. We're going to launch a whole new product category and put this on a lot of people's heads. And it's just there was a huge gap between what that leadership was thinking and what it actually was able to go out there and do. It happened again with Daydream. And still, there's, Google as a company is still honing in closer and closer on the thing that people actually want and that large market. But it's like, how many bodies do they have to go through and how many bad products do they have to go through before they actually achieve that market fit?
It's
12.
It is. It is interesting though when you say, because you brought up Apple and I hadn't thought of that, but if you think of like we were talking about Apple, I don't think last week, but the week before, and how we might get an Apple Watch kind of equivalent of some kind of glasses where it's notifications and that kind of thing, not true AR, but like kind of phone extension type thing. I think it's interesting to think of this kind of acquisition, given that this is very notification based, stuff.
We also lost Bose, right? Bose died Bose's AR effort died
10 minutes.
Yeah, like recently. The thing about the Apple Glass,
vice president of VR.
No, not Boz. Jeez, that was a tough joke. Wow,
that was a hard one.
Are you stealing my jokes now, Jake?
Sorry.
The thing that was so fascinating about the Apple rumors is the rumor or suggestion that they could have a tracking system on glasses that isn't actually a camera based. It doesn't actually resolve your face. Like could you have a tracking system on glasses that isn't a camera? It was kind of like the interesting rumors that came around with the last period of glasses. And that was one of the things that did in glass the first time, was you put a camera on it and people were like, why are you filming me? We're eating pizza. Like, I mean,
I think it's interesting if you think if this came out, something like this came out without a camera and it was purely notifications hooked into your phone, kind of basic info, a bit like a smartwatch type thing. I think that's interesting to think of Apple as releasing something like that and Google kind of responding and having their, because, they kind of are somewhat competitors now with terms of mobile phones with, Pixel and that kind of thing. And of course, Android. But it's interesting to think about how you could have these two companies both releasing kind of like a halfway AR that's like a more like a smartwatch kind of functionality on your face.
Okay, these aren't AR, and I know I could have a whole conversation with 100 people and get totally different conversations occur. This is a HUD. This is just a notification system without the ability to record or interact. It's just a notification system. And the concept of how do you define AR and its usage and all that, I've gone back and forth with people, but this is very passive. The Apple Watch is a relatively passive piece of technology. I mean, I've
Yeah.
been stewing whether or not I want to get a smartwatch, but everything I've come to, it's just saving me the ability to have to pull my
To open
phone
your
out,
phone,
look
yeah.
at it,
No,
and put it back. But
but
there's more
again-
to it than that. There's
Well, there-
tracking. There's sensors that are doing things. Will these smart glasses, G1 smart glasses, have the ability to do more than just show me stuff?
I don't think so. Well, that's not the impression we get from
We'll
rumors
see.
and things. We'll
It's
see.
tricky. Look, the Bose ones are such an interesting example because that was a system that I believe, someone correct me in the comments if I'm wrong,
I tried it.
but it used the GPS on your phone to call itself AR. So in theory, it could say, walk down the street, turn left, because it's
Mhm.
got that much resolution. But you'd actually need way, way, way more accuracy on your GPS and your direction, and it needs to work even if there's tall buildings all around you. So there has to be like a whole level of positioning understanding that's way beyond what like Bose was doing, and obviously the Focals weren't quite there yet.
These are the Bose. I tried the Bose audio AR, whatever they were, at South by Southwest a few years back, and when it worked well, but it didn't always work. And there's a calibration issue. There's IMUs trying to determine which way you're looking, but really, if I were to I'm not going to whip quickly, but if I were to whip quickly and then whip back, it gets confused because the IMU, I don't know whether it was the IMUs they were using or whatever, but there wasn't a lot of value to me. I personally did not see a lot of value in that technology by itself. Now, as a supplement to some other piece of technology, sure, that's a great idea. But by itself, who wants to spend money on glasses that know where you're looking and can talk to you?
But that's the point is you can't see these. So when we talk specifically about Apple, the whole array, the whole constellation of their devices, where you've got earpods in your ear, this is the LiDAR scanner that could, in theory, provide you. So I've got this on an iPad right now, and I tried an app with Occipital. They're the ones that make the structure sensor, and they basically gave me a free test to try this out. And what I did was a scan of my living room where I just took the iPad, whipped it around my living room to do a scan of the living room, and it produced a 3D map of my living room that looked reasonably like my living room. Like I could see all the outlines of everything. But then what I had to do was send off the scan to Occipital servers where they used cloud processing, a ton of servers, to reprocess everything that the iPad did mobilely and combine it with the imagery that was captured every time I was moving it around my room. And then it sent me a file that was like 150 megabytes or something. And it was a reasonable, pretty good capture of my living room. So I was able to actually look around, see my couch and all these things. And it actually had the textures applied to the map. But the idea or the theory out there is, what if you just put the LiDAR scanner on a pair of glasses and had it just scanning without having the camera on there in order to protect people's privacy? It was a very interesting idea. The thing I wanted to bring up.
Well, you need the camera to be able to get the texturing.
Yes, but
LiDAR
the point is, what if you don't need the texturing in order to provide people the useful features of like mapping?
Just so
like
you can tell how far things are, or
if they could look at the point cloud and just know that you're 50 steps from the corner of your street, and then the AirPods or even the rims of the glasses, the ears going over your head could say, okay, turn right up here. That's kind of what I'm getting at, is where when you've got this constellation of devices where you've got a watch, you've got AirPods in, and they all have certain bits of the puzzle, and you put them together and have this feature at the end of the day that says, it's just effortlessly turn left at the street corner.
Because you can combine the
watch kind of does that today, where it vibrates on your wrist and says, okay, turn now. That's all I'm getting at, is when you start putting all these pieces together, you might have a great feature like turn-by-turn directions or step-by-step directions without actually even needing a display system to really do it. Or if you do the display system, maybe it's even better.
it's interesting too because you think of like Apple is such a closed system that if they bring out a glasses thing with a lidar scanner that needs it to have an iPhone as well for GPS, it's kind of like that's a closed system. With Google, they have Android and they have the Pixel phones, but it's kind of like they don't have that same reliance on having one piece of hardware from their company that they're like you need to have this to. It'd be a matter of which thing's compatible with what and that kind of thing. So it's interesting to compare the two.
Cool. Well,
strategies.
we'll have to pay attention and see
what
where all this
happens.
goes. Yeah. All right. So our last piece of news here, and we talked about it. We briefly touched on it. Facebook's prototype Photoreal avatars now have realistic eyes. Are we talking about these, Harry? Are these eyes?
They don't look quite so realistic. I wouldn't say photorealistic, but they look decent, but not photorealistic.
What makes the eyes so real? Well, actually, those look pretty realistic.
Man.
These are the new ones, right, Heaney?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's pretty impressive.
I was looking into this today, and apparently Apple had a feature in their most recent beta for the last version of iOS that would correct your eyesight, your eye line, when in a FaceTime call. And it apparently got stripped out, if I was reading the headlines right, in the subsequent beta releases. But the idea is your eye is always pointed up at the camera, and this would just use machine learning and the system to identify where your eye is and actually point it directly at the screen, so that the person on the other end of the call, it would look like you're pointed directly at the person and having an eye contact,
that's very
face-to-face
strange
conversation. And this is more or less the similar research, but dedicated to VR when you have the headset on.
It's pretty impressive.
That is very impressive. I mean, looking at those eyes, they look very far out.
So I wonder what level of technology is necessary within the headset itself. Like, will traditional eye tracking like Tobii provide this level of tracking, or is it a new generation that they're working on?
I think the thing we have to take away from this, and I think it's one of the things that's kind of hard to grasp out there, is there has to be a close, tightly knit cooperation between hardware and software to keep this stuff going wonky. It doesn't lend itself to an open ecosystem very well. There's the question of whether your data is owned by you or being misused if it's an open ecosystem. But even beyond that, it's just, to your point, Kyle, about Tobii, like if Tobii detects, sees a shadow and makes your eye go wonky, you don't want to see that. There has to be correction into the whole software system so that your eye stays focused on what the software thinks you're looking at. And there has to be filling in the gaps is more or less the point. Machine learning and all these software systems are about filling in the gaps in the data in smart ways. And it only works when you have this tightly knit system working between the software and the hardware. And you don't get that unless you have a very strong, large software team really making sure that the stuff doesn't go wonky.
See, this is the kind of detail that we're at now. This is the level we're at where this is the type of stuff that we're working on. Like the big, huge, screen door effect and FOV and all that stuff. Those are still things, but now we're getting into the details. And the devil's in the details.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd have to make this work, you have to go get scanned in a rig that has lots and lots of cameras, and then you have to have a headset that also has the cameras on your eyes and a camera on your mouth. But in theory, if you pull all those pieces together, maybe soon they can make the process not require dozens of cameras to actually capture your body. I don't know how they're going to get around whether the headset itself actually needs to see your eyes and your face. I think that's going to be assumed, because right now, all of our avatars, the things we're using now, are doing so much guessing as to what we're actually meaning to express. And when we get to this level, it's doing much less guessing, but it's still going to be doing some guessing.
Yeah.
Well, it's a bit like at the moment, like, you know, the avatars, like I know Heaney is programmed our avatars, so it's like there's certain points of interest that the avatar eyes will look at and
Fixate on.
focus on. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So it looks like you kind of, because I am looking at you and that's where my eyes are pointed, but if I kind of move slightly, it's probably still looking at you because it's kind of, you know what I mean? It's got these points of interest, whereas obviously this is eye tracking and with cameras of your way to offer much more accuracy. Imagine if you could all see where all of us are looking exactly at any point. How weird would that be?
It's also
the
just-
future.
It's also just funny, like, I'm sure a lot of people watching right now and watching in the future obviously would have just played or will be about to play The Last of Us 2. And that game is a game that really brings like graphical fidelity for human facial animation on a console and in games up to a whole new level. And then you just look at this stuff and it's already blowing that stuff out of the water. But obviously it's a very, very different type of thing at the end of the day, but it's fascinating to see.
All right.
It is interesting. Yeah. Go on.
I think we have exhausted this. I think we need
Yeah.
to move on. Let's jump to the release of the month. I mean, the release of the week. Okay, so Jamie, you told us about some of the things before our unfortunate demise. Not sure how much of that ended up going out into the public, but what's everybody playing this week?
Well,
Let's start with
Okay,
with
go ahead.
Shooty Skies for,
well, yeah.
for Harry.
So out today is Shooty Skies Overdrive. It's on the Oculus store for Quest and Rift, and it's going to come to Steam next month, which will be for all PSVR headsets. The main holdup with the Steam version is that they said that I was told yesterday that they've got to get more controllers and test the controllers out because there's a whole bunch of different controllers they need to support. So that's the main issue. Yeah, apart from that, it's on Oculus and Oculus Rift and Quest today. It's a lot of fun. It's like a wave shooter, room scale wave shooter. Things come at you at kind of a 180-degree angle, and bullets are flying everywhere. And you just your right hand or left hand is a little pilot, like you can see in the picture there, with a little weird cat or some kind of animal. It changes, and you got to dodge bullets and shoot things like retro-looking computers and different stuff according to what theme the level is. There's a review that I think is up now on the site that I wrote, which it's a really fun, good experience. It's a bit short. The campaign's 5 levels with varying difficulties, the highest of which is called Overdrive and is quite difficult. But I think it's a really fun foundation and really good base gameplay mechanics. I can see like 6 months down the line when, more modes are added. At the moment, there's only the campaign. But I feel like, as I said in my review, if there was more modes, I know there's an arcade high score mode on the way, modifiers, that kind of thing. A few more of those kind of features that you see in other arcade-like titles on Quest and Rift. I think it could be amazing. I think the foundation is really solid in terms of the gameplay, moving the gun, and it can only go up from here. But it's a fun campaign. It's really good. I'd recommend people check it out.
This is on Rails, right?
On
Rails, like
Rails? No, it doesn't move. So
It's a wave shooter.
It's a
Please come
that's
at
one of
you
the-
in a room scale.
that is one of the
Did
things
you ever
that we
play
spoke about,
Vortex?
though.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like that, but in a bigger kind of environment. But that's one of the things we did talk about in the interview too. Is they did think about, they said when Pistol Whip came out, they were kind of like, oh, should we have done something where it was kind of, they decided to not move it forward for fear of losing comfort, rating / making more people sick. So it's more like you sit and it's like this kind of like square environment which changes depending on the level you're in. They're all themed to different things. That one's like kind of lolly or candy, as you guys would say, kind of, world. But yeah, it's a room scale thing.
As you would say.
As you would say, you heathens. But yeah, so no, it's not on Rails. It's just a set area for each level. But it's really fun. It's a lot of, there's some really weird, cool power-ups you can get for your non-dominant hand. There's a lot of cool things going on with that. I really enjoyed it.
See, I'm glad it's not on Rails. Actually, I mean, there's so many games like that are on Rails at this point that I keep waiting. Like the next iteration, the next clone of this concept is going to be like, oh, I don't want to shoot anything. So here, as you're on the Rails, you have to shoot baskets, and then they give you a baseball bat. And then you have to hit baseballs as they're coming at you. And then you have to catch footballs, all on Rails. That's all going to happen one of these days. People are tired of gun. Well, some people are tired of gun games.
One really cool thing that this does too, because it's not on rails, it's in a set, environment, is whatever you've mapped your boundary to, whatever weird shape it is, it kind of gives you a pixelated representation of the boundary at all times on the ground, which is really useful because it's a game where you want to be moving and kind of dodging things. So you can always kind of have an area, you have an idea of the space you're in on the floor marked out, which I think was really cool and a very useful addition. But yeah, cool game. Definitely check it out.
Cool.
Available now. And the other release, the big release,
a small little game by the name of Marvel's Iron Man VR came out, or is coming out on PSVR tomorrow. David has a review up on the website now. But yeah, this is a PSVR exclusive, full AAA Iron Man game. You play as Tony Stark, you suit up as Iron Man. You get to play kind of both sides of his life, doing some kind of the fun kind of social interactions of Tony Stark, but then more importantly, doing this stuff, flying around, shooting the bad guys, making the quips. So what you do is the game has a really, really good control system, right? It's appearing on PSVR, and I know to a lot of people watching this, PSVR is like this kind of dated old fuddy-duddy thing, but developer Camouflage really does get a lot of mileage out of the headset with this thing, and they have such an innovative control scheme. Just like real Iron Man, you fly with your hands, and where you go depends on the direction you're pointing your hands. And because the PlayStation camera that faces you when you use PSVR, it could see the moves at all time because you have your hands down by your side to fly most of the time, right? So even though traditionally it's a 180-degree headset, especially when you're using the moves, actually the tracking algorithms here work really well to give you a pretty decent, let's say, facsimile of 360-degree play. So you can really, really get lost in the combat in this game. I know Marvel Powers United came out on Rift a couple of years ago, and we all thought it was quite disappointing. This time around, what Camouflage has done is to have just taken one Marvel superhero and really, really refined the gameplay around that one superhero so that it feels very fleshed out, unique, and satisfying. And for me, David reviewed the game. He gave it a 4 out of 5. He really, really loved it. And I really love it too. I think, personally, I kind of want to say, and this is maybe a little hyperbole, but we'll see, this is maybe my favorite VR combat system. The way that Camouflage has approached combat in this game is so incredibly intricate and intrinsic to VR in that enemy attacks come at you kind of slowly and are very obviously telegraphed, which gives you as Iron Man plenty of time to know when to kind of boost out of the way, which is a double tap of the trigger button on the move controllers. At least I think, yeah. Which you can get out of the way of combat really, really quickly. You can get out of the way of incoming fire really, really quickly, which gives you that kind of MCU movie cinematic feel straight away that you just dodged a bunch of bullets. I feel really cool. And then either you raise your hand to fire a repulsor blast, like you would as Iron Man, which feels, really, really cool. Or, there's really good gesture controls in the game. So you could actually instead just dip your wrist like that, and that will bring up like wrist-mounted rockets or smart bombs or something along those lines, which you could then fire instead. And the mix of kind of very cinematic feeling gestures and really, really cool interactions mixed with that really like one-to-one intrinsic and very, very intricate like movement and dodging system gives you such a like tangible, well-paced combat system that I absolutely fell in love with. The loading times are really, really, really bad because it's on PS4 and it's absolutely pushing the limits of PS4 and especially VR on PS4. And I can't wait to see if we are able to play it on PS5 with less loading times because it will make the game. It could push the game to 5 out of 5 territory, in my opinion. But yeah, I just absolutely love it. If you have a PS5, PS4, even if you have a PS5, tell us. If you have a PS4, just go and try it out. There's a free demo. I just completely fell in love. I think the story's great as well. And I really can't recommend it enough as almost a sort of swan song to PSVR. Even though there are some more games coming out for it that we should be excited about in the future.
I'm very excited for this game.
Very cool. Very cool.
Oh.
Anything else that released this week that we should discuss?
I got something under embargo that I'll talk about next week. That was really cool. But yeah, I can't really.
Okay, cool.
Oh.
Teaser.
One thing I wanted to ask you, Jamie, is Iron Man in the whole user interface of him inside the headset in the movies. When you see inside of his headset, and he's got all this UI in front of him. It's kind of always been the people make fun of it. People who are in VR or AR make fun of this made up interface that doesn't actually work. And I guess I'm wondering can you explain why does it work in VR so well? I've seen some people comment that is it useless at all, or is it all useful?
It's funny you mentioned that. I think there's actually a lot of elements of the game that you and Heedy would actually be kind of fascinated about. In the first scene, you're Tony in his apartment, and he has to go find his glasses, and he picks them up, puts them on, and it does the whole kind of AR overlay thing in an environment that you've already learned to navigate, which is really, really, really interesting. You get giant screens up in some parts of his house all of a sudden. You can talk to Friday, the AI operating system, which is really cool. In terms of when you're Iron Man, yeah, you get that kind of overlay that you kind of see in the movies. And it's interesting. We actually had a lot of people ask us if that would be distracting or inconvenient. For me, it really, really wasn't, because there's actually a couple of elements in it that are incredibly useful. So you have your health bar down here, but not only that, you have this kind of little 3D model of yourself that sees where your hands are pointed, so that it kind of helps stabilize you a bit more as you're flying and gives you a bit more context. And I think by having those kind of actually really genuinely useful elements rather than just a load of jargon, which is obviously what you see in the movies, is, oh yeah, a bunch of ones and zeros and some other, maybe he's watching TV over here or whatnot. By having that really useful information, it does become actually a very interesting and very useful UI, I think.
Interesting. Thank you.
Cool.
Cool.
All right. Last piece of stuff that we're going to talk about is the hot topic of the week. What?
Oh, yeah.
You like that?
Don't touch the screen. It's a hot topic.
All right. So,
Ooh, don't touch it.
all right. This is specifically, Ian, I can't wait to hear your answer to this. 1 year out, or 1 year. Have you had your Valve Index for a full year, Ian?
Yes. It's pretty close to a year, but yeah.
All right. So the big question is, did it live up to its promise? Is it what we thought it was going to be?
I should get to answer that question first. Why should I get to answer that question first?
Why is it?
Because I had a Valve Index for 2 weeks before it broke permanently.
Oh.
So I'll just go ahead
No.
and just say no.
Okay.
I say yes. So I've got a piece that I think I'll probably end up publishing tomorrow. So check uploadvr.com for it. If you're listening to this on the podcast, it'll already be up. I tried to break this down into sort of 5 categories or 5 things to think about that weren't necessarily covered in the first review, the first sort of impressions after a couple weeks with it. There's a lot of things you can learn about a headset after a year with it. And more or less, so I'll just put this out there, that Rift S has stayed in a box almost the entire year.
How dare you?
I know. I've pulled Rift S out from time to time, but it's either been Index or it's been Quest for me pretty much all year long. And I've gone back and forth between the two of them, and each has their problems. So one thing about, we'll just get right into it, with Index is heat. It gets warm. It gets very warm. And when I first reviewed this, it was sort of before the heat of summer settled in. So it was just like at the start of summer, right in the first days when it's hot out. I was turning the air conditioning cooler whenever I went into VR, and that was true of any headset I would put on. You can get hot and sweaty in every headset. I'm getting hot and sweaty inside of a Quest right now. just because the air conditioning is not on very cool and it's getting very warm in the house. But Index gets warmer than other headsets, it seems. It gets a very warm experience. And we're waiting on one of our staffers is waiting on delivery of a chill deck, which can fit into the USB slot on the front of the Index and provide a little fan to hopefully cool down the experience.
So weird.
The other thing is the Index.
It's so weird that it needs that at the end of the day. It's a third-party peripheral that's almost like not necessary, but like enough people think it's close enough to necessary that they buy it.
I mean, it's kind of just it's literally just I turn my air conditioning 2 degrees down whenever I want to go use this headset. That's more or less the situation, and it's fine. I don't really have to. Yeah. So then we've got the controllers. The controllers are a completely different situation. When it came out, we had Aperture Hand Labs. First developers were starting to add support for it. And then a year later, or not a year later, but almost a year later, we had Half-Life Alyx, which enabled a whole bunch of optional interactions with the 5-finger tracking. And I maybe leave in the comments if there's other games that we don't know about, but it doesn't seem like these have set the world on fire. These controllers have not been widely adopted, I would say.
Well, even Alex didn't have. You say a whole bunch, but it's more like 1 or 2 kind of interesting optional extras.
And I certainly, having never played Alex with the Index controllers, I certainly didn't feel like I missed pretty much anything at all playing with touch controllers. I still feel like I got the complete experience, even if I couldn't push a can.
And like, to this day, I don't think people can still play Skyrim without like modding it on those controllers, which is, absolutely crazy.
Well, I've talked to obviously I did the sign language in VR test where I got to witness 3 people who know sign language try to communicate using the Quest hand tracking, and it's very fascinating to talk to some of these people who are in VR chat and using Index controllers and others to work around, to adapt their sign language to work around the fact that you've got a grip in your hand. And it's kind of mind-boggling to me that there are severe limitations to the Quest hand tracking if you're trying to use it for something as complex as American Sign Language or some other sign language from another country. But you also have to work around it with the 5-finger tracking on Index because you're holding a grip in your hand. So none of the current generation controllers, as far as I can tell, are providing, the full social experience of being face-to-face with another sign language user and being able to communicate with them exactly one-to-one as you would in the real world. So neither Index nor Oculus Quest hand tracking really fulfills that need. And it's just kind of interesting that they're both completely different perspectives on how you would approach this problem of hand tracking, but neither kind of fills that gap. And that's obviously a big difference from gaming. Gaming is like a whole different issue. But there's like things like pinching, right? Where you could pinch your fingers together with hand tracking to get a little bit of a haptic sensation of your fingers actually touching against one another. And that game Play Bunker, that Gerald, I don't know if he's watching, but he's got that pinch gesture where you just touch a top button on the controller and then you touch the trigger, and you could feel like you're actually picking up a chess piece off of a table. And the Index controllers do that too. You've got the same kind of gesture where you've got the pad on top and then the trigger, and you could do that same kind of thing. It's just we've seen the Reverb G2 coming out later this year has sort of standardized on the Oculus Touch input system. And none of them are really using the pad except for this Index controller.
The Reverb G2 controllers don't even have the, capacitive
buttons. So they won't be able to do that then.
Yeah, it's literally just the buttons and triggers. It's not even the, are you gripping it? Do you have a hand on it?
So, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I feel like it's always been such a kind of like what's the word? I don't know, like superficial part of VR at this stage anyway, right? Like Carl's playing around with his hands right now. Like we all kind of sit around and just mess around with the touch controllers like this in the studio right now. No one's ever actually found like a really genuinely brilliant use for even what was on the touch 4 years ago, right? And it's just one of those things where, like, yeah, you can look at that and see on paper straight away why it's such a brilliant idea and could bring about so many benefits to VR. But also, there's just still so far to go that even as they ship as these like $99 controllers or something along those lines, it's just still so proof of concept at the end of the day. And why would Skyrim VR support it? Why would half the industry support it?
How
many
bucks for a pair of them?
Yeesh!
Yeah, it's not cheap, and when you add on the basins, it becomes an extraordinarily expensive system. And we went back and forth on this, and the biggest part of my article is kind of like having to explain this is very, very complex because I can't say one is better than the other really cleanly. Like I have to say there's all these if statements, there's all these things that I have to account for when I explain the differences between, say, a Quest and an Index. And the biggest one I would have to say is I enjoyed every minute of Half-Life Alyx in an Index. It was beautiful. I never once thought I should go hook up my Link and do this in an Oculus Link. It's just night and day. It's so easy to say, okay, I'm putting on the Index every time. Play through that entire experience in Index. It was wonderful. Pistol Whip is my favorite game, which I bring up everything. It's my favorite game in VR. I've put on 60 or 70 hours into now.
That's weird. Never heard of it.
Yeah.
That's weird.
I have Pistol Whip ready to go on both Quest and Index. And 9 times out of 10, maybe even 9.59 times out of 10, I will go to the Index. I'll press the power button on my PC. I'll wait until the Steam VR base stations spin up. I will go through the whole process, and I'll get the hand strap controllers. Might even plug in the cord because the cord isn't plugged in to get it hooked up to my PC, just to have that Pistol Whip session in the more comfortable experience here. However, if I go back and look over my year in VR, Iron Lights, Tetris Effect, the list is extensive. I can't remember all of them just this very minute, but like Rec Room, laying down on the floor in Rec Room and doing prone shooting from the top of a billboard. All these moments I had in Quest, I had many, many, many more of them because of 11 table tennis. Because I had friends who had picked up Quests this year, and they were ready to go as quickly as I was in my Quest. And you and I, Harry, you in Australia playing Crisis Brigade, and me over here playing Crisis Brigade. We did that in Quests. And these examples are significant of just how many times I put on the Quest. It's going back to it. I would come out of a headache. I will come out of a headache. I will come out of this session today with a headache because I wore a Quest, where I probably wouldn't have had a headache after time with Valve Index.
But the thing is, it's like you own both, right? So it's kind of like, yes, of course, if I own both, I'd choose to play on the Index too, but I wouldn't recommend someone go buy an Index just to play Alyx. I think that to me, that's the kind of the kicker, right? Like, it's like people always like, I have a friend who's kind of vaguely interested in VR, and he's kind of talked about the Index, but it's hard to recommend the Index, one, because not everything's, like you got Alyx and stuff, but then, as you said, Skyrim, other big games, the controller support is kind of a big thing, and it's very expensive.
Headaches are a big thing.
Yeah, definitely a big thing, but the price gap is, like, for someone who's only marginally interested in VR and is still kind of figuring things out, right? Like, the margin, the margin in the price difference is huge.
Mm-hmm. I also get
deal.
headaches trying to figure out the controller bindings on Steam VR when I'm using these controllers. So. I will say. Sorry, Carl. You wanted to speak for ages. What do you want to say?
Oh, sorry, Carl, if I cut you off.
Right. You've lost audio big time.
Oh, sorry.
There
My
we go.
cord,
There he is.
my cord bumps the button. No wonder everybody was ignoring me. Wasn't the normal reasons. No. The Valve Index is a non-Facebook headset. And how much influence does that concept have on you and your praise for this?
I
Well,
use
here.
Facebook
Tell
headsets
us
all the time,
No,
but
no, no,
there's other people who
How much?
it matters
Maybe-
to
how much?
significantly more.
Maybe not you specifically, but people in general have said, I don't want a
Yeah,
Facebook headset.
Don't want a Facebook headset.
If you don't want a Facebook headset, this one would be the one I'd recommend very
Yeah.
clearly.
Yeah.
Like there's, but Reverb G2 is going to
That's what I was just
potentially
gonna
going to
say.
change
Hopefully.
that. Yeah.
Again,
Hopefully going to.
that price golf, right? Like the Index has such a price golf attached to it in terms of being so expensive that if something like the Reverb G2 comes along and is kind of comparable to, or a bit better than a Rift S or something, that'd be an interesting place to see what that the Reverb G2 and anything else that comes along feels. But yeah. It's like it's a bit like you can't recommend one. Like it's not like you don't not recommend the Index, you don't not recommend the Quest, but they kind of occupy different areas. And I think the biggest
do.
one for a lot of people would be
Yeah,
price.
They speak to two different areas of VR now, essentially, right?
Yeah.
And, like, think about it this way: like, some of the stuff that people, and including us, are finding revelatory on Quest in this day and age is actually stuff that we were finding revelatory on Rift back in 2016, right? Like, I think about like Superhot and how, yes, it makes the most sense on Quest, but for the enthusiast market, everyone had that experience back in 2016 and had that really kind of amazing, like, eye-opening moment of what action in VR could be with Superhot. And it's the same for a lot of experiences on Quest that are now speaking to a new generation of people, a different type of audience, because it is so affordable and so accessible.
Like me.
And yeah, well,
I'm
exactly,
the perfect
right?
example
And,
of that.
yeah, and it just gets back to this is something that you like to speak to quite a lot of. Yeah, the Index does this really, really, really fantastic premium thing right now, and companies are going to continue to keep doing those fantastic premium things. But it's at this point, it's looking like the next 10 years of VR isn't defined by what those premium headsets are doing, but then how well Quest is able to kind of replicate that experience as the bar keeps rising, right?
I think we're talking at such an in-between stage where there is no great wireless solution for PC, and it's really tough to kind of compare the wireless freedom of Quest. I wrote this in my piece, but like it is and it remains absolute magic to walk from one room to another in a Quest and have a new room Guardian set up. And it's substantial in situations where you've got to relocate from room to room. Kids want to use the living room, there's sound because you want to go play a game privately, and everyone is hearing the kids screaming in the background, or the dog is barking, or whatever. There's significant reasons to want to switch room to room, and you can do that in minute or less with Quest, where Valve Index you would have to remount base station, and
the big one for me, it always
and then
comes back to
wireless is on top of it.
Yeah, and the big one with that, to that point, even just not within your home, the big one for me is I can take the Quest to people's houses and be like, try this. Or at least I could pre-pandemic. But I did that a lot. I take it to friends' places and be like, try this, because they never tried VR. And it's so easy to take with you somewhere. And as you said, it's introducing a whole new generation of people to VR who haven't tried it before, and it's very easy to take around. And that's like, for me, that is one of the biggest things I love about the Quest is I can take it to my family when I go visit them. I can take it to friends' houses. It doesn't feel like something that's exclusive to my room that I have to be like, come in and let me show you where I've got my base station set up, as you said. So yeah,
it really makes you wonder, like, whether Valve went back to the drawing board to develop a new headset with wireless, or whether they're actually going to ship wireless for Index. Because, like, yes, I value Inside Out, and I value the ability to like reach behind my back and have that movement captured versus losing it sometimes with a Quest, and it's just you look at Reverb and think, okay, that's a nice backpack. So Reverb G2 looks like a really nice backpack machine. But what happens if I want to use it with a wireless, connection to a PC that's in the same room? It's just really rough that the PC market has these things where you've got to open up your PC to add wireless to, and we don't have a more universal, easier to use wireless solution than that. I don't know. All PC headsets can benefit that, including the Quest.
I wonder how long it'll take for Valve to say Lighthouse is dead.
That's what I was trying to get at. Is that like if they're going to go inside out on tracking, it seems like that you also go wireless connection to the PC at the same moment.
Right, but the Knuckles controllers, the Index, they need that as well, that Lighthouse technology. So there's a huge change of their ecosystem to get away from it truly.
It'd be a big deal to move everything.
Yeah.
That drastically.
I'll be curious to see that. Well, I'll tell you what, guys, this has been a fantastic conversation, but I think we have gone a bit longer than we normally would.
Definitely gone a bit longer than we normally would.
Yeah. But great, fantastic conversations. I want to give a shout out again to the audience in the YouTube chat. Unfortunately, we have lost connection to it, so we didn't see
the comments.
your comments. We're sorry.
Your comments. Sorry about that.
Right, and also thanks to the folks watching in other platforms such as Big Screen. Thanks to all of my teammates for putting on a fantastic show today. Want to encourage everybody to go to uploadvr.com for all your latest news, reviews, comments, and interviews. And while you're at it, check out our YouTube channel and see all of the wonderful content that we've put there as well, including things like the VR recap. Jamie, you want to tell us all about that real quick?
Yeah, we kind of revamped the VR recap. That used to be a thing that we do once a week, every Friday. We'd do like a weekly news recap. Now we're just kind of streamlining the process a bit, making videos for the biggest stories of the week when they happen. So far, we've seen a really good response to that. And we're quite excited about keeping that up for sure. I think that's one of the big ones. We're kind of revamping some of our review stuff as well. You might have seen more video coverage around the review for Phantom Covert Ops last week. We've got a bit more video coverage for Iron Man VR this week. Next week, definitely look out for. We're in the midst of arranging a spoiler cast with the game's creative director, I think. So I'm really looking forward to doing that.
Awesome.
Lots of cool video stuff coming up. Also,
this weekend, there'll be a interview with the Shooty Skies developer and Crossy Road co-creator Matt Hall that I did, which is a really good interview. It was really nice to chat one Australian to another Australian. So there we go. That was a nice one-to-one Aussie chat. So check that one out.
Groovy. Ian, any final words?
No, I've spoken enough. I'm sorry.
No, fantastic.
Why are you apologizing? You have such knowledge. You're so powerful.
Thank you. Oh, good.
So
powerful.
Was I fair enough to Index? I want to say I wouldn't have had a headache if I had done this in Index, and I do have a headache because I did it in Quest.
No, we're calling you Darth Vader because you were so mean to Index.
Oh, come on.
Anyway, all right. So, cap things off. Thank you all very much for watching. Be smart. Be safe. We'll see you in the future. And Friday, if you can go ahead and activate my boosters. Thank you. Goodbye. 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 Thank you. Goodbye.